From west to east and kingdom to kingdom, you're listening to the Diz Unplugged Connecting with Walt podcast. Connecting with Walt is brought to you by Dreams Unlimited Travel, experts at helping you plan the perfect Disney vacation. Visit them on the web at dreamsunlimitedtravel.com. Hello and welcome to episode 163 of the Diz Unplugged Connecting with Walt podcast. I am your host and Diz historian Michael Bowling, and I am joined by my co-host, producer, and good friend Craig Williams. Craig, how are you today?
I'm excited. It's a big day for us.
It is. Yeah, we have Don Hahn back on the show. We gave you a little hint last week, so you probably all figured it out.
Oh yeah, so. I'm sure they all figured it out. But yeah, it's very exciting. So of course, back for some video fun, and not the only video fun that we have this month actually, but back with video fun and interviewing Don Hahn again, which it's been a couple years now, but still always exciting when you can sit down and talk to someone who has had such a huge impact on Walt Disney Studios throughout the years. So it's very, very cool.
It is. Has it been that long? I thought it was just a few months ago. Dear Lord, time. When you get older, time just... It just gets in a sports car and puts it into high gear and speeds down that calendar speedway. Oh, well. Anyway, well, speaking of Dreams Unlimited Travel and all that, I kept hearing Kevin on our Walt Disney World show talking about how there are openings on the Dreams Unlimited Travel exclusive Adventures by Disney Egypt trip. And I just decided, I've had a rough year and a half. So and we've all had a tough 2020. I needed something to look forward to. So I signed up for it, and we'll see what happens. But it's a great itinerary. And I know the Diz will add their special touches to the trip. But I figured if I'm going to see the Sphinxes and the pyramids, I want to do it in the Disney bubble. Yeah. So
it's going to be very exciting for you. So if I learned anything from walking around Adventureland here at Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, it's don't let the camels spit on you. And I think that would hold true in Egypt as well too. So maybe just avoid camels while you're over there, and you'll be fine.
Okay, so but still okay to fly on the magic carpets, right?
Yeah, if you see any magic carpets flying around Egypt, go for it. Just camels, stay away. It spits on you and ruins your day, and yeah, it's not worth it.
Okay, and then I also decided, even though Destination D was canceled, I still had my reservations, and I just decided, I'm going to go. Mm-hmm. And just relax, have a good time, maybe go to the parks, maybe I'll even go to Universal, who knows. Right. So yes, I'm going to head down to Walt Disney World in November. And I might be going in March, because as we learned today on the Diz, connected to and I'm going to let you talk about this, Craig, but connected to our auction for Give Kids the World and Labor Day Marathon, I mean, there's a whole lot going on. So do you want to share some of that?
Yeah. I would be more than happy to. So this coming Monday, Labor Day Monday, it's no longer, it's the long Labor Day weekend, but yes, Monday, Labor Day, we are doing a 12-hour marathon for Give Kids the World from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. You can find that at youtube.com/DizUnplugged. I'm sure it'll be on the homepage of the Diz as well, to wdwinfo.com, as well as dizunplugged.com. And we are doing, another one of our 12-hour marathons to raise money for Give Kids the World, like we've gotten used to us doing every November right? Always the first Saturday after Thanksgiving, but we're doing it early this year. It's a complete partnership with Give Kids the World. They have been asking us to help them out with this, so we're just jumping ahead of time and doing this a little bit sooner than we have in years past. But it is pretty much all the same that you could expect from any other marathon shows we've done in the past before. There's going to be an auction that is already live now. We are into the fourth day of bidding at this point, and you can do so on hand bid. So if you've done any of our past Diz Unplugged auctions before, we use an application called hand bid, and that's how you're able to bid on any of the items that have been donated. I think there's something like a couple hundred items, maybe even more than that. Maybe like
there's a lot.
Yeah, I remember that the number 500 got thrown out. I think it was they had 500 items that they could have put on for this, and they held back a little bit, but I mean, a lot of items ranging from movie memorabilia to random park memorabilia. It's all over the place. There's probably something there that you can find that you would love. On top of that, too, there's also a raffle that I believe it's $25 per entry, and you have a chance of winning a 4-night cruise on Disney Cruise Line, courtesy of Dreams Unlimited Travel, when Disney Cruise Line is back up and running again. So that's an option. You can make direct donations if you have nothing else you're interested in. And I have a feeling that there's going to be some bids on one item in particular that will be added to the auction. It is a signed copy of Dave Bossert's forthcoming book, 3D Disneyland, that you're actually going to get to hear about more during the live marathon show. That is going to be one of the pre-recorded segments that we get to release. You'll get to see it then, and if you miss out on it during the interview, it will be then released as a whole episode on Friday with Connecting with Walt. So you'll still have a chance to watch it if you don't get to watch it live in the moment, but you're going to get to hear about the book. You're going to get to hear about some of the pictures you can see in the book, and then it's going to make you want to bid for the signed copy of Dave's newest book. So there's lots of exciting stuff there. And if you want more information about our auction, I'm going to link to a video that we have that we recorded with Stephen Amos from Give Kids the World that kind of explains a little bit more about the auction, some of the items that we're really interested in terms of the auction. And then also that's where we revealed the information that we will be having a huge event coming up in March. Again, a cooperation along with Give Kids the World, where we will be doing a big meetup unlike anyone that we've done in the past, because there's going to be important people in Disney. Disney President Jeff Valley apparently is going to be a part of it. They're going to get some of the Mickey Mouse Club, the 90s Mickey Mouse Club reunions. And if Michael's there, we can add in an earlier Mickey Mouse Club as well, too. We'll push you up on the stage with them and be like, they're all together. They're all in the same club. And, but they're going to be a part of it. I hadn't heard about it until we were recording this announcement for it. So I still don't even know everything that's going to be involved, but it's going to be a multi-day event with lots of presentations. And on top of that, there's going to be the touches that the Diz and Dreams Unlimited Travel always puts into these meetups. There will be another auction as part of it as well, too, to raise money for Give Kids the World. I know that there's details coming forward about room blocks and such for the people who want to make sure that they're getting great rates on their vacation if they're planning on coming to the event. And there's just so much more to be announced with this event, and it's going to be talked about more and more as we get closer to the event now. But that's your heads up on it. And it was I'm blanking on the dates, honestly, Michael. It's March 25th,
26th, and 27th.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So, and so at the very least, if you're interested, maybe block out those dates as possible for being here. Who knows? Maybe more gets added and they extend the fun. I have no idea. Don't quote me on that. Don't try to say that Craig sent you saying that there was going to be extra fun added on the front and end of it. That is probably not the case, but at the very least, we know there's going to be a lot of fun on those 3 days. So just stay tuned for more details.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah. Just a reminder that we'll be continuing our exploration of Walt Disney's Disneyland Man in Space television series with the second episode of the series Man in the Moon. It's available on the Disney Treasures DVD set called Tomorrowland, and it's also on YouTube, and Craig will include the link in our show notes so you can watch it in advance. Well, it's our pleasure to welcome back director, producer, and writer Don Hahn to talk about lyricist and director Howard Ashman. In 2018, Don produced the documentary Howard that is now streaming on Disney+. Don, welcome back to Connecting with Walt.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, and congratulations on another brilliant documentary with Howard.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a real pleasure putting it together and telling his story, because I was worried it would get lost if we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter, who grew up with Little Mermaid, she doesn't have the Disney gene like I do and like my granddaughter does.
Right.
But when it debuted and she was visiting, I said, "Hey, do you want to watch this documentary?" And she loved it. And it blew me away. Yeah, and she loved all the behind the scenes that you shared, especially. And then immediately afterwards, we wanted to watch Disney film that Howard Ashman made, and we ended up watching Beauty and the Beast.
That's great. Yeah, it kind of changes your perspective on some of his work, so that's a great thing.
It absolutely does. I went back and watched a number of his films after that. I was telling Craig, we watched Little Shop of Horrors, The Little Mermaid, and Beauty and the Beast, and you're right, it was completely different perspective on those films. Yeah. So now, for a generation like my children, Howard Ashman wrote the soundtracks of their childhood. So for folks who are not familiar with Howard Ashman and his work, can you give us some background on Howard and his career?
Well, Howard was, born in Baltimore, loved musical theater, probably coming out of the delivery room. As a young kid, he put on shows like a lot of us did. You put on shows for your family or whatever, but his were highly produced, whether they were puppet shows or shadow shows or whatever. For kids in the neighborhood, he would draft kids in the neighborhood to be in his shows. And he pretty early wanted to be an actor or involved in theater. There was a children's theater organization in Baltimore that his mom took him to, and he was really involved in. And so that was kind of the early part of his path. He went on to college, to Boston University and to Goddard, and ended up at Indiana University. And then in his 20s, like remarkably, he moved to New York and set up a theater. It's almost unbelievable that you could do that, because it would be unaffordable these days. But this is back in the 70s, and you'd actually go live in New York and find a derelict section of town and find a place to live and find an old building you could start a theater in. So he had tremendous ambition, and that was a theater he could workshop his work in. And he wanted to be a director. He wanted to be a playwright. And that's the theater that Little Shop of Horrors came from. And that was kind of his start.
Now, one of the segments that I thought was magical is how you created some vignettes that Howard created as a little boy with his sister Sarah narrating how Howard loved to tell stories, and it was her job to be the audience.
Yeah, I really was taken by that story. The idea of this little girl who's younger than Howard being his first audience, and Howard saying, you wait outside the door until I get in here, and I'm going to set up this little show just for you. And I was looking for some sort of kind of fun fantasy elements to the documentary, because documentaries can be dry sometimes. And so I went around and found a lot of 1950s toys. And thanks to my producer, Lori Corn Gable, we went shopping on eBay and we found all these little toys and we set up this little vignette of what it might have been, and tried to visualize what Sarah, Howard's little sister, was talking about. So it was a chance to kind of break the ice and just say, this guy was, even as a child, kind of full of fantasy and full of putting on shows, and welcome you into his worlds that he was creating. And I think that gave the audience almost permission to kind of buy into that idea and buy into Howard's worlds and understand that we're going to tell you a story about a really special guy. So that was a really fun kind of way to bridge you into Howard's world. And I also didn't want the documentary to get too dark. Howard's life was not dark. He had a tragic ending in the AIDS crisis in the 1990s, late 80s. But the rest of his life, I think, was joyful and full of great work and striving and, some achievements and failures and things that all of us go through. So I wanted the movie to start out and finish with that idea that even though this guy may have had a difficult ending to his life, he really didn't want to be and shouldn't be defined by that.
Mm-hmm. One of the stories I've heard Sarah tell is, as a little boy, Howard, he put on major musical productions. He did Gypsy. He staged Gypsy.
Yeah.
And that he didn't care for how the girl he had cast was doing the striptease scene, and he fired her. Mm-hmm. And I thought, so he already knew that, okay, I know how I want it to be at a young age. And then the mother got upset that her daughter had been fired.
Yeah. Can you imagine? He fires this little girl, and then he goes ahead and does the kind of stripper scene himself behind a big sheet in shadow, in shadows and things. He was, I guess the word would be opinionated, controlling, those kinds of things, and those aren't always a bad thing in a creative environment. Sometimes it's. He was a collaborator. He was absolutely a collaborator, but he had strong feelings about what the idea should be, and he had really strong feelings about what would work and what wouldn't work, and that's something that was really enjoyable to work with. You had to bring your A game. You had to wake up in the morning and come to the studio and work with Howard with your best foot forward and your most articulate arguments about what you wanted in a show, because he would come with his just naturally. He's really smart, really funny. And able to articulate what he wanted. So it just made us all step up our game when he got to Disney Animation to be able to do the same.
Yeah. Now, a turning point in Howard's life was when he met Stuart White when they were in college. And that was Howard's first big love. And Stuart was a director and the only director Howard trusted with his work. When they, along with Kyle Rennick, opened that off-Broadway theater you mentioned at WPA. And that's when Howard, his work to the WPA, that Howard got recognition from Broadway producers.
Yeah, he really did. And it was, I suppose, he did many things. He did some of his own work that Stuart could direct. He did just work that he wanted to see that was perhaps underproduced. And then he began to do shows. I think God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater was probably one of his first shows in the WPA theater. And Kyle Rennick was his managing director of that theater, and became an amazing friend and resource for this movie. I didn't know Kyle before this. And I think he was maybe suspicious of us when we came in and said, gee, we want to make this movie. Will you talk to us? But he became such a wonderful resource and gave us hours of audio tape and photographs and that kind of thing. And sadly, he passed away at the very end of this process. So we've kind of lost him along the way. But it was full of stories about Howard. And that was the theater where Howard really did get some recognition. So, he was very fearless about the work he put on. Imagine a show like Rosewater, which was Kurt Vonnegut's, fairly well-known book. He didn't go to Vonnegut at first and ask for rights or anything. It reminded me a little bit of Walt Disney and Mary Poppins. He just said, let's develop this and see if we can't take it anywhere. And then he asked for the rights. So, and Vonnegut loved it in the end and wanted to help him out. So, very fearless about his approach to things. And after that, then is when he did Little Shop of Horrors. and really controlled everything. He was the writer, and he was the lyricist, and he was the director, and really did everything to control that piece of work. And as a result, the stage show of Little Shop is very tight and very reflects Howard perhaps better than anything.
And his partnership between Alan Menken and Howard Ashman began when they worked together on the musical God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. So how did they get together for that musical?
Well, they were both in New York working at the same time. Alan had written some songs for Sesame Street, some commercial jingles. Alan was in the Lehman Engel workshop in New York, and so he got introduced or heard about Howard from a friend, an acquaintance who said, "You really should meet this guy. He's kind of interesting." And Howard was looking for musicians because Howard wasn't a musician. He was totally a musician because he sang and performed everything that he wrote, but he didn't play an instrument. He didn't play piano. So Maury Yeston, one of Alan's friends, said, "Oh, you got to meet this guy named Howard." And so he went over to his place and met Howard, and Howard was auditioning for composers and really thought Alan was a good fit. And Alan's gift, among many things, is that he also could kind of serve up any form of musical theater or idiom or pastiche that Howard wanted. So to sit and work with them, Howard was very in charge almost about what they were doing, but Alan would be able to sit there and play it all on the piano if Howard said Viennese waltz, if Howard said something like the opener of the second act of this Sondheim show, or that he would have this musical reference also, and became this musical right hand to Howard, and their collaboration was really good. And I think Alan is incredibly gifted in as you know, in his musical ability to get a melody in your head and not get it out. There's not many people like that. I mean, I suppose there's some popular musicians, the Elton Johns of the world, that can do that. Richard Sherman can do that, but it's a short list. And so that was a perfect match, I think, for Howard. And even though Howard stepped away and collaborated with Marvin Hamlish at one time, he always came back to Alan because of that relationship they could have. And Marvin's amazing too. I mean, he's no slouch, but that was a less successful relationship than it was with Alan.
Yeah. Now, Little Shop of Horrors went on to be made into a feature film and was also successful. Was Howard pleased with the film adaptation of his stage musical?
I don't know. I think he was very pleased it was being done. He was very much a part of the process. Wrote the screenplay for it. David Geffen was very was sure that Howard was involved and in the middle of it all. I think it was difficult at times because they had to rewrite the end of the movie because when they tested it, the audience didn't like the ending that had originally been part of the stage show, which is a kind of darker ending where the monster eats Manhattan. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert in reverse. So he had difficulty on it. Every movie has its challenges, but he did it, and he did it quickly, and he did it willingly. I also think for Howard, it's always difficult to give up things and to say, here to Frank Oz, you take the show, and I'll help, was probably not the easiest thing. But Frank Oz is a great guy and a great director, so I think in the end, he probably was happy with the movie.
I know that I think I read one story where the producers or something said that they thought Suddenly Seymour could be a hit, could be a single and all that. But they said, but for us to sell it, you need to change it to Suddenly Someone. And Howard said, sorry, the title is Suddenly Seymour. And that was the end of it.
Well, the nuance of that is Suddenly Seymour has a wink in it. It's a funny song title. It has a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing to it. Suddenly Someone or Somewhere or whatever the other ideas were sound more legitimate and more self-serious. Well, he didn't want that. He realized that for the movie to work and for the show to work, it had to have that wink or that spin on it that made it actors very sincerely performing this material that was really satire in a funny way of everyday life. When you can write lyrics about your house with a chain link fence and a garbage disposal and those kinds of things, and perform it with heart and sincerity, that's very funny, but also poignant. So it's a really razor's edge that Howard's walking with these things that some people may not have seen right away, and it's brilliant.
It is, yeah. And there is some adult language in there, mild adult language.
Uh-huh.
So Howard, he definitely walked the edge on that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what was funny is that his theater, the WPA theater, was a 99-seat theater, so small, very small, and yet when those shows were on, everybody who was anybody in New York made the trip down to 23rd Street, 22nd Street, where his show was, to this derelict, kind of crappy section of town to see his shows because they were so good. And that was part of the adventure of seeing A Little Shop of Horrors. And Rosewater it wasn't Broadway. It was off Broadway. And you had to almost take your life into your old hands to go down there. And when you got there, you would see this amazing treat of these kids putting on this show that was just funny and interesting and dynamic. And it was a time in New York, I think, that was very special. And Howard grew out of that time.
And during this time, Howard met Bill Lauch at a bar in the Village, and they immediately clicked. And Bill said that a couple of days later, Howard called, asked him on a date, and it was to the Grammys. And I was always curious, what was the third date like? I mean, how do you talk going to the Grammys?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But Bill gave Howard the domesticity that he had always longed for. And
and he did. And that was a revelation, I think, when I made this movie, is I didn't, when you work with someone, you feel like you know them a little bit. We really don't know the people we work with that much. And so being able to turn back and tell this story and find out more about Howard's personal life, because I want to tell the story about the whole man, what his entire worldview was. You find he was a guy who just wanted some normalcy in his life, because that allowed him to free up his time and his efforts towards his work. And so he wasn't necessarily the guy that would go out and party all night. I think he enjoyed going to shows, watching movies, staying home, watching TV. And that was a good match for Bill, who and their relationship and their love for each other was really evident the more I dug into this and the more I started telling his story.
Yeah. And then also during this time, the whole specter of what was called the gay cancer loomed over the gay community and would later be given a name, HIV/AIDS. And Howard's first love, Stuart, succumbed to it when he was just 34. And another friend of Howard's, David Evans, also passed of the disease. And this deeply affected Howard.
I think it deeply affected everyone, obviously. Yeah. It was a very challenging time, not unlike what we're living through now, but perhaps even worse, because it really hit a community in New York that was very close to the creative community, initially to the LGBTQ community. And it was very difficult. I remember even in Los Angeles, losing all these people who were brilliant composers and choreographers and just people that were dropping like flies. And the death sentence that HIV and AIDS brought to someone who contracted it was a part of the dynamic that was really different than perhaps what we're experiencing now. Yes, there is a horrible pandemic going on, but at that time, it really was a death sentence. There was no cure. There was no treatment per se. And that's what was so horrific about it all.
Yeah, the lack of knowledge was what was so frightening about it, I think, too.
And no government help or political help was slow in coming, as is the case with everything in life, I suppose. And luckily there were people around, like Dr. Fauci was one of the who we hear all the time now, was one of the leading AIDS researchers for years, and really pioneered a lot of the treatments, even going back to that time that Howard was alive. So there were wonderful people in the scientific community that really pushed ahead on treatments, but not an easy time to contract the disease.
Yeah. Now, Howard's next project was a musical about a beauty pageant, Smile, and that's the one where he teamed up with Marvin Hamlisch, and that is where he met Jodie Benson. She was one of the actors and performed probably the one song that has survived this musical, and that's Disneyland. And it's been performed by many other artists. And the weird thing is, Smile was a hit with the opening night audience, but the critics panned it. And this just devastated Howard.
Yeah, I think whenever he had, and I suppose we can relate to that because we're all about the same way. We want people to like us and like our work. And so whenever the critics didn't care for his work, no matter what it was, it really affected him deeply because he was a pretty sensitive guy. And he would have to, take a break for months and kind of recharge and figure out what was next in his life. So Smile is a good show. I mean, it still gets performed a lot, particularly at girls' schools because it's about a beauty pageant. There's a lot of roles for girls in it. Marvin Hamlisch is amazing, but their collaboration wasn't always as smooth. And Howard had taken up the role of lyricist, writer, and director, and probably that was too much. He was overwhelming. So I think the show was good and well received by the audiences, but just didn't connect with the critics. Didn't connect. It wasn't star driven. There wasn't a particular celebrity that was driving the show. It just wasn't connecting at all, and closed pretty quickly. But he did meet Jodie Benson out of that and invited her to audition for the next project he was doing, which happened because Jeffrey Katzenberg, the head of Disney, and David Geffen were friends. And Geffen said, you should really bring this guy, Howard Ashman, out and have him work on some of your movies. So Katzenberg was really courting Howard heavily at that time. And eventually that's where Howard ended up out in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, this is really where, a door is closed, but a window is open. Yeah. Because Howard loved Disney animation because he believed it was the last place to do great Broadway musicals.
Yeah, Broadway was a mixed bag back then, especially big, highly produced Broadway shows. There were a few of them. But, I suppose Phantom of the Opera, a lot of Andrew Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice shows, which are great, but not a lot of things that Howard liked to do himself. And his off-Broadway sensibility didn't quite fit the big commercial houses that would seat, 2,000-3,000 people on Broadway. So animation was a place where music and musicals was really a comfortable fit. And it's also a culture that was comfortable for him. I think he worked a little bit in live action when he got to Hollywood, but he found in animation a group of collaborators who were, for the most part, fun, humble people who enjoyed making cartoons for a living. And that was a little bit different than the Hollywood of big egos and phone calls and lunches. I think his work with animation was a very comfortable fit in terms of personalities and the kind of people that he could work with easily. And we loved him. It's not too much of an exaggeration to say that we really loved the guy, because as good as his work was, it was thrilling when his songs came in or when he was in the studio to work. He was demanding and he was difficult, but he was also hilarious and funny and smart. And to have somebody like that in the studio, you can imagine it was like this injection of adrenaline into a place that was a little bit sleepy for a long time. And we were a young studio. We were ourselves kind of in our 20s and 30s, wanting to do some good work. And starting to do some good work. Movies like Great Mouse Detective and Oliver and Company that Howard wrote a song for. They're good movies, but they hadn't really broken through to be a general audience movie. And Howard gave us that confidence, I think, in saying, oh, now we're working with someone who really has a different point of view and breaks us out of our Disney mold, which had gotten a little lazy, to be honest, and takes us to a new place. And those are all really exciting things.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the documentary, you state that Howard taught the team how to approach storytelling. So, what did the team learn from Howard?
Well, I think in particular storytelling with music, we had many very talented storytellers on the staff and writers and things. So working out stories was possible, but we were making movies that had a few songs in them. They weren't musicals. They were, just animated movies. And yes, occasionally you would stop for a song, but what Howard brought to it is to say, no, 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 you really have to reverse that and say, if you're going to make a musical, the songs drive the plot. And when your character is full of emotion or grief or anger, that's where the songs have to go. And you have to be brave enough to put those songs there. So that was a big breakthrough. It wasn't just that you went to, in Great Mouse Detective, you go to a little tavern in London and someone's singing up on stage and it's a little song. Well, that's not a musical. A lovely moment, but not a musical. So Howard says, no, you take the big emotional, changing points in your story and you put the songs there. And so that started us thinking in a different way. And the songs became tent poles for us in our storytelling. You were able to, take those songs when a song like Be Our Guest came in the door, or Belle, the opening of Beauty and the Beast. You could put that into work and you could storyboard it, and it established the character and the setting, and that Belle was an outcast in her town, and it established who Gaston was and LeFou was, and that Belle was different from everybody. And all of that was in the context of this song. So I can't say it made our job easier, but it made it clearer what we had to do. And that collaboration with Howard really was what taught us about making these musicals.
It reminds me of what critics said about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, that it was a musical where the music drove the stories, because up until then, the musicals would, go along, and then suddenly everybody would stop and sing, but it didn't propel the story. So the Disney Studios, what really was groundbreaking in that way, and so Howard Ashman really continued that tradition from Walt's very first feature animated film.
Yeah, that's a really interesting comparison, because Walt wasn't a musician, but he had a huge appreciation for music. And from the very earliest cartoons and the earliest soundtracks, they were always based on music. The director's office was called the music room in the Hyperion studio. There was always a composer sitting there next to the director during the shorts era. And when he got to features, you're right, it was all about using songs to tell story. Howard said even songs like Hi Ho from Snow White would have been a perfect kind of Broadway musical opener for a second act. So you've gone out, you've had your interval and your intermission, you've come back, you sit down, the curtain goes up, and you hear somebody yell in the theater, hi ho, and the dwarves come out, and all of a sudden you're back into the story again. And so he had a appreciation for the Disney movies along with Broadway. He always said, and I think I put this in Waking Sleeping Beauty, that there's nothing like a Disney musical. And he always tried to put his movies like Beauty and the Beast for Disney on the shelf with Cinderella and Peter Pan and Snow White. So you could really feel like, yes, that's something that belongs there. And that was emboldening, I think, if that's a word for us in the studio at the time, because we thought, wow, we can do that. We can try to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. But it was during the production of The Little Mermaid, Howard went to the doctor because he'd seen white patches on his throat, and he knew it was thrush, which is a type of fungus. And the doctor wanted to test for HIV, but this is just so tragic. He had to decline because he knew he would lose his health insurance. So as a compromise, the doctor tested for T cells, which is a type of white blood cell. And it was so low that the doctor knew Howard had HIV. And it's been said that this diagnosis affected how Howard approached writing lyrics for some songs, and that he became a little more difficult to work with.
Well, I think any diagnosis like that would affect you. Mm-hmm. It in the room working with Howard, it never came up. We never talked about his illness, never talked about AIDS, never talked about any of that. It was always about the work, always about what was going on that day. But it was not something that we brought up or were aware of. When we were working on Beauty and the Beast, some people say, well, that's really a story about the AIDS crisis, and the beast is the metaphor for a person who's been cursed by this disease. And I suppose in retrospect, that may be the case. We never talked about that in the room. That was never intentional, and probably never intentional in Howard's mind. Who knows? But the flip side of that is, as an artist, any artist probably can't help bringing some of what's going on in their life to their work. And Beauty and the Beast being a metaphor for the AIDS crisis may have had some resonance in the work that he turned out for that movie. So we'll never know completely. All I know is that he focused on the story. He focused on what worked for the movie. And that's what ended up on the screen. And if there was any overtones or echoes of that in terms of what was going on in the news, that we left that as something other people could interpret.
One of the things that really touched me is that even in Howard's final days, his creative drive didn't fade, and he actually wrote the song Prince Ali for Aladdin from his hospital bed, and that he listened to recordings by phone. And I just thought, how remarkable of him to be able to do that.
Yeah, we had set up as much of that as we could once we learned that he was sick, because in the beginning we didn't know. And we worked with him in New York, partially thinking he was just being a diva about saying, I have an Oscar now, you have to come to me. But what we didn't know is he was ill. So we set up, a way of setting up speakers in his house so he could listen to a good quality sound of what we were doing. We flew back to New York and worked with him a lot by his house. And when he was in the hospital or at a place where none of us could travel, he really did just get on the phone and had lost his voice and would just whisper and just say, okay, when you get to the second, and everybody was quiet in the studio waiting for this guy to say something on the phone. And he didn't care. He just wanted to give the notes and make the story better. And he did. So there's no way to describe easily what that felt like. We were just pushing ahead, trying to get the movie done. Grateful that Howard was willing to contribute, wanting to contribute. He wanted it to be all about the work. He didn't want his life to be defined by AIDS. And he didn't want to be seen as some sort of AIDS activist or AIDS warrior. He was who he was. He was a dramatist. And that's what he devoted his last days to.
Yeah. Now, looking back, what effect did Howard Ashman have on you and your work?
Well, I think obviously a lot, and I think maybe more now. I'm, I won't say at the end of my career, but I'm certainly after a large body of work. Looking back, he taught us how to be fearless. He taught us how to push for the highest quality solution to a problem, how not to settle for something that was mediocre or just okay. He taught us how to be clever and push for big ideas in terms of how to tell a story with music, how to mash up Hans Christian Andersen and a Rastafarian crab. So those kinds of things require some artistic bravery, for lack of a better word. And I've been lucky to have other people in my life like that. Almost all of them at Disney. Disney was my university. Disney was my master class. And I showed up there when I was 20 years old. And so you can imagine I was like an empty bucket full of nothing. And to be able to work with these men and women was revolutionary. And Howard was one of them. He was the kind of guy without having to be a mentor or a disciplinarian or anything else, was instructive to all of us. Talk to anybody that was there during that time and worked with Howard, and they'll tell you the same thing.
So does his approach to storytelling still have an influence on Walt Disney Animation Studios today?
Yeah, it does. This will tell you about my personal life. Last night I was up till 2 a.m. watching the new show on Disney Plus about the making of Frozen 2. And I haven't been at Disney Animation for many years, and so watching them work was nostalgic almost, because they're sitting around a table working with their songwriters going, that's just not telling the story. And you can't put a ballad there. And they're just saying all these things that we used to say. And they're struggling with the same things we struggled with because it's hard. And they're asking the same questions that they should be asking, which is, this song, this piece of music in Frozen has to tell this story. This character has to have a song moment because he doesn't have one.
Mhm.
So they're struggling with all the things that Howard struggled with, that Lerner and Lowe struggled with, that Rogers and Hammerstein struggled with, which is, how do you take something as wonderful and communicative of a language as the musical theater and use it to its maximum to tell a great story? And so I was sitting there with a big grin on my face, because I just thought, yeah, these guys are suffering trying to tell this Frozen story, and good on them. Good for you that they're struggling and trying to do better work and trying to make it as brilliant as it is. And it really shows that process. So yeah, I mean that's a process that's very much alive now, and you can trace it back to Walt Disney, and you can trace it back
Yeah.
even before that to people who want to put amazing quality work into the world, a world that can be really mediocre sometimes and full of a lot of junk. To say the world doesn't need more junk, the world needs something that is uplifting and inspiring, and that's what Howard taught me.
Yeah. And I always look for the want song in every
Yeah.
Disney animated film now because of Howard.
It's almost a cliche, but Howard taught us that, and that's something that it makes sense. Even in movies that are not musicals, you still have to have that soliloquy. I was
Mhm.
talking to a director, the artistic director of the Globe Theater in San Diego, really great guy. And he was saying, well, Shakespeare is a lot like musical theater. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it's in Shakespeare, he would stop and have a soliloquy and have a character tell you about the feelings he or she was having, the feelings and the drama going on in their life. And it's exactly like a character stopping and singing about it and what that character wants in life. And he said there's such great crossover between directors that direct Shakespeare and directors that do musical theater, because a song in a Howard Ashman show is really a soliloquy set to music. It's a monologue that, instead of you speaking, you are singing part of your world, but that's a monologue about what she wants. And I just thought, what a brilliant association that is, that all dramatists, going back to the pyramids, are really after that moment where a character can stop and tell you what it's like to be a human being. Because at the end of the day, that's why we go to the movies. We want the lights to go down, and we want somebody to say, this is what our life's like. How can you enjoy that in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I had not thought of that with Shakespeare. I took a whole year's course on him too at university. But you're right. Now that I think about all the plays I had to memorize, um,
Wow.
you're absolutely right. Yeah, the exams were the teacher would have a line, the professor would have a line, and you had to state who said the line in what act and what context and who was it to.
Oh, that's much.
Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing.
Isn't that I don't know how
Yeah,
I passed that course. Anyway, so when you think of Howard Ashman, what is the first memory or image that comes to mind?
oh boy. He was big-hearted. I think the first image, I suppose, is he was always glad to see us. He was always grateful that we would get together. Um, and on one hand, he was a very warm, giving person. Smart is right up there with the first images I would think of. Um, Smart in a couple of ways. Smart in terms of his knowledge of musical theater and life, and his preparation for what he was doing, and his homework that he would do. And smart in terms of just being funny. Some of the funniest people I know are just also some of the smartest people I know. And his sense of humor worked its way into his lyrics. You see it there, and his lyrics are an indication of what he was like in his personal life.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, is Howard available anywhere else besides Disney Plus?
It's not right now. It's just on Disney Plus, and I don't. There's no plans that I've heard of for anything beyond that. So it's a pretty easy place to reach if you want to log in and take a look at it.
I
And
know.
that because I
See
think
now,
this is an independent.
Mhm. So, well, it's wonderful. Now, I have your other documentaries like Waking Sleeping Beauty and all that. So I want it to be released on physical media because it's such a wonderful companion piece for Waking Sleeping Beauty. So,
Yeah, they may someday. They may. It's Disney, and the way they release product is always a mystery and a bit magical. So and the industry is changing, as you guys know more than
yes.
anything. Is the streaming world is where people live right now, and I'm sitting in a room right now full of probably 1,000 DVDs, and I'm not sure what to do with them. So I like to own things. I like to have them to watch, but also I know I can access most of these somewhere online right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So are you working on any projects now you can talk about?
We just finished a project for Epcot Center, the Beauty and the Beast sing along for the French Pavilion, with Angela Lansbury, who is turning 95 next month.
Oh my gosh, that's remarkable.
And she's brilliant. We worked with her because it's the sing along is hosted by Mrs. Potts, and we called her up and said, "Would you be interested in doing this?" And I was a little apprehensive because I thought, well, I don't know. I hope she wants to, and she did. And she came in just so bubbly and prepared, and recorded some of the most beautiful, funny, great dialogue I've ever heard. So we just finished that, and that's playing at Epcot as Epcot reopens again in the French Pavilion. And then I'm actually looking and reading a lot of material for upcoming documentaries. Disney's doing a lot of adaptations of animated movies that we all worked on back in the 80s and 90s. Mulan's a good example of that. Hunchback of Notre Dame's on the slate for someday. And so there's some of that in works. But I'm really looking for another story to tell about. I just love doing them. I love documentaries because they can dig into someone's life in a way that you maybe didn't know. And I love making films about artistic heroes of mine. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for right now.
So, Don, thank you for telling the story of the man, behind the music and films we've enjoyed for decades.
It's hard work on one hand, but what an amazing treasure hunt and journey it's been for me and my crew to tell this story and dig a little deeper into Howard's life, and get to work with his sister and with Bill and with all the people that were so generous in telling their version of Howard's story. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And thank you for being so generous with your time to come on Connecting
my
with
pleasure.
Walt.
I always love talking to you. It's always a pleasure. So anytime, happy to do it.
Wonderful. Well, when your next project is ready, I hope we're at the top of your list to come back and talk about it.
You bet. I would be honored.
Now you can be our guest for This Week in Disney History. Well, here we are, first full week of September, and we're going to start out with September 6th, a documentary film directed and produced by Don Hahn. How appropriate. And produced by Don and former Disney executive Peter Schneider, debuted at the Telluride Film Festival in Colorado on September 6, 2009. The film documents the history of Walt Disney feature animation from the making of The Fox and the Hound in 1981 to the release of The Lion King in 1994. So, Craig, what is the name of this documentary?
That, of course, is Waking Sleeping Beauty.
Right, which we just referred to. When I saw this pop up, I had to bring it in.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get much more perfect timing than that. So just all flows together.
It does. It's funny. This whole week was all about closures at Disneyland of attractions. So it was hard to sort of find other stuff. And a few at Walt Disney World. I've thrown a couple in here. Okay. But anyway, and as we said in the interview, Waking Sleeping Beauty is a marvelous documentary where you sort of see the fall and rise of Disney animation. It's really well done.
I agree.
And Howard Ashman was a big part of that rise, as we learned in our interview. Okay, September 7th. This animator, artist, and Disney legend is born in Los Angeles, California on September 7th, 1911. He may be best known for redesigning Mickey Mouse for his landmark role as the Sorcerer's Apprentice in Fantasia, a look which remains Mickey's official look to this day. What is the name of this Disney legend?
I want to say it's going to be a guess from me, but I want to say it's Fred Moore.
Absolutely. Robert Fred Moore, better known as Freddie Moore. And despite his limited formal art training, Freddie Moore rose to prominence at the Walt Disney Studio very quickly in the early 1930s due to his great natural talent and tremendous appeal of his drawings. So Freddie worked on such Disney classics as Pinocchio, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Peter Pan. He later became resident specialist on animating Mickey Mouse. Moore's animation of the earlier Mickey design is especially memorable in the 1938 short Brave Little Tailor, the last significant appearance of the pie-eyed Mickey Mouse. Okay. All right, September 8th. This popular Disneyland attraction closed at 7 a.m. with a ceremony officiated by U.S. Navy Commander Robert Thomas on September 8th, 1998. What is the name of this attraction?
Can you repeat the question one more time for me, please?
Sure. This popular Disneyland attraction closed with a 7 a.m. ceremony officiated by U.S. Navy Commander Robert Thomas on September 8th, 1998. What is the name of this attraction?
The only thing that would make sense in my mind is for it to have something to do with the submarines and have the Navy there for that. So I would guess that just by default.
That's right, because when they opened it, the Navy commissioned the submarines back in 1959, and they decommissioned them in 1998. Luckily, unlike 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea at the Magic Kingdom, ours was resurrected. So, and let's hope they keep it going.
Yep.
Because there's always rumors they're going to close it down.
Mm-hmm. I don't think they can close it down now after this day in Disney, or not this day in Disney history. That's what we're doing. One day at Disney. Thank you. It's after they did that special piece on the scuba diver who goes down below Finding Nemo, Submarine Voyage, and Jungle Cruise. Like, they made a celebrity out of his job. For them to then just shut down the submarines and be like, okay, well, not as needed anymore. I think people would lose their minds over that. So hopefully it's submarines at some point, even if the theme's different.
And it fits so nicely in that corner of the park. But, there's always a rumor they're going to use that area for, the frozen area,
True.
Arendelle and all that. But, rumors come and go. So let's hope that one goes. And they find another spot for it. For September 9th, what is the name of the Epcot parade that ran for the last time on September 9th, 2001?
For 2001, I'm assuming... Oh, man, this is where I'm going to be bad. So it's obviously Tapestry. I just can't... I would assume that that didn't switch over to Dreams yet, and it was still Tapestry of Nations, but I could be wrong on that one.
No, you're absolutely right. Very good. This featured puppets designed by Michael Curry, who later designed the puppets for The Lion King on Broadway and other theme park shows. And Tapestry of Nations first debuted in October 1999. I enjoyed this parade. I have the soundtrack and all that.
I love the soundtrack still. I remember watching the parade once. Definitely, it was Nations, not Dreams, but I prefer Nations over Dreams anyways. I don't like the dream motif that repeats over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. I saw both of them, but yeah, it's too bad they can't figure out a way to have a parade in Epcot. Maybe with the retheming it to, this Magic Kingdom 2.0, they might figure out how to have one.
Now would be the time when the crowds are small and they can do that. So
Yeah, yeah. Okay, on September 10th, this illustrator and voice actor was born on September 10th, 1982, and became the fourth official person to voice Mickey Mouse. What is his name?
the fourth person in the list is Brett Iwan.
That's right. Absolutely. With the passing of Wayne Allwine, the third official voice of Mickey in 2009, Walt Disney Company looked within the company to find someone to perform the recognizable voice. Iwan won the role after a company-wide search where the animator friend from Pixar submitted Iwan as a possibility. In a final audition, Russi Taylor, the voice of Minnie Mouse and the widow of Wayne Allwine, helped in selecting Iwan. The only other two to voice Mickey full-time was Walt Disney himself and sound effects artist Jimmy McDonald.
And I mean, I think Brett was working at Hallmark when he ended up winning the job too. So just be like you said, because of his friend submitting him. So that's a good lesson to everyone out there that it doesn't matter what you're currently doing. You never know where you're going to end up with your talents.
That's very true. Very true. Okay, on September 11th, following the morning terrorist attacks on the Pentagon, New York City's World Trade Center, and in the air over Pennsylvania, on September 11th, 2001, the Walt Disney World Resort in Florida and the Disneyland Resort in California closed without incident. This closure marks only the second time Disneyland has locked its gates in its 56-year history due to a national tragedy. What event caused Disneyland to close its gates for the first time?
I'm stretching my brain on this one because I haven't really done a read up on all the times that Disneyland and Walt Disney World is closed since the beginning of COVID and all that, when that was fresh in everyone's mind. But I think I'm on a hot streak, so I might continue being hot on this one. I think it might have been JFK is when they closed.
Yes, it was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. Another day I remember vividly, even though I was only in second grade at the time. Okay, September 12th. After 6 years of planning and building costs of $1.8 billion, the Walt Disney Company opens its 11th theme park on September 12th, 2005. What is the name of this resort?
2005 would have been Hong Kong, I believe.
That's right, Hong Kong Disneyland. It is Disney's fifth vacation resort and the 11th theme park in the world. It consists of the Hong Kong Disneyland theme park, 2 hotels, the Disneyland Hotel and Disney's Hollywood Hotel, and retail dining and entertainment facilities stretching over 310 acres on Lantau Island. Hong Kong Disneyland's Adventureland is the largest Adventureland of all the Magic Kingdom parks around the world. And as I've said before, I found this park very charming. And, of course, they had to do a huge expansion because this park was built, even at $1.8 billion, it was built on the cheap. I had read somewhere that for a while, Michael Eisner didn't even want a full castle. He just wanted like a facade that people would just walk through. That's how cheap they were trying to get. I don't think he could have lived that down.
No, that would be one of the most embarrassing things in any park. And as we've joked about on this before, Walt Disney Studios is very embarrassing. But even there, you get to walk through the weird shopping dining center as you come into the park. So Oh,
Oh,
yeah. That'd
yeah,
be tough.
that park needs a major overhaul. But when you finally get to Hong Kong Disneyland, Craig, I think you are going to love it.
One day.
Yeah, one day. Well, you did very well this week.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I was on a hot streak there.
All right. Well, Craig, I thought I learned a lot about Howard Ashman from my research and the documentary, but Don shared even more about Howard and his career and his approach to storytelling in films. I was really fascinated by it.
100%. And one of my small complaints with Howard that I talked about with some other people. It's a very beautiful and moving documentary, but I feel like one of the things that Don chose to do with it is making it all voiceover, and instead of featuring talking head interviews. And sometimes in documentaries, that adds this extra deeper level of clarity to the story. And so I felt like at times that was kind of lacking in Howard, as much as I really enjoy that documentary. And I think it's a must watch for any Disney fan, including anyone who's watching this show. So being able to sit here and then get that story from Don and hear some of the emotion and see it coming from his lips, that kind of adds it right back in for me.
Mm-hmm,
So it was a pleasure getting to sit here and hear him talk more about it and get in just a little bit further into the next level. And it's a very good complimentary piece now to watching Howard on Disney Plus.
I agree. Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, and I know I'm wondering if some of the issues too, where a lot of the people that they would have brought in are no longer with us.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's obviously the case, is that it's hard when people have moved on, and on top of that too, you then have to make a choice of, okay, well, if we do all voiceovers, then it doesn't matter if it's archived or if it's brand new. So I completely get why they went that route and why he made the decision to do it that way. But there's an extra level of emotion when you see the subject talking about it, and seeing the look on Don's face as he reminisced more about Howard there. That's that extra spark that it's undeniable.
Yeah, I agree. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to watch Howard, we hope this sparks you to go in and watch it. And I know I'll rewatch it after speaking with Don, because I'm going to go in with a new perspective and I think a deeper understanding of Howard. And so I'll definitely want to rewatch it again.
On top of that too, I'm going to, as long as I remember, I'm going to include a link in our description and show notes to the it wasn't 2019. It must have been 2017, the D23 Expo, where Alan Menken did his one-man show where he went through it all. And Alan Menken shares a good deal about Howard as that goes along too, and as gets into the songs that they wrote together. He shares a little bit of extra stories and stuff. A lot that's not necessarily new information, but again, just like this, it's different when you're watching Alan sitting behind a piano reminiscing about the times that he was writing music with his friend and partner in crime with music writing. So it's I'll make sure to try to include some of those ones in our description so you can see those and add that extra detail as well too.
That'll be wonderful. I'll look forward to seeing that concert again as well.
It was good.
It was. I remember. Yeah, it was excellent. So Craig, until next time, how can our listeners connect with you?
You can find me on all the random shows on the Diz Unplugged podcast network that I'm on, and then always on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Teleclaster. What about you, Michael?
You can send me messages at michael@wdwinfo.com, Twitter at mbowling121, Facebook, I'm Michael Bowling. It's the Connecting with Walt. Michael Bowling - Connecting with Walt is the one you want to like. Instagram, I'm Michael Bowling the Diz, and you can connect with me and Craig on Twitter at Connecting Walt. If you would like to listen to more shows on the history of Walt Disney, his studio, his Imagineers, and Disneyland, check out our Disneyland podcast archives for my Disney history episodes on the link Craig includes in our show notes or at DisneyUnplugged.com. And look for past episodes of Connecting with Walt on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, where you can subscribe to our show and leave some positive reviews and ratings when possible. Thank you for making us a part of your day. And remember, I only hope that we don't lose sight of one thing. That was all started by a man, Walt Disney, and his brother Roy.